Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Valeria Romori, and I'm the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Los Angeles. I would like to welcome you all to The Green Obsession, From Architecture to Urban Forestry, a talk with Stefano Boeri, organized by the Italian Cultural Institute in collaboration with the American Institute of Architects in Los Angeles and Stefano Boeri Architects and Interiors. Special thanks go to Gaia Ceccaroli, International PR Communications, for our collaboration. This event is also part of the 5th Annual Sustainable Development Festival, Festival dello Sviluppo Sostenibile, organized by the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development. I'm truly delighted and thrilled to open this webinar featuring architect and urban planner Stefano Boeri. I had the opportunity to meet Stefano in Marseille, France, where he designed the museum and presented it at the Italian Cultural Institute there. Today, Stefano Boeri will be in conversation with Carlo Caccavale, the executive director of the American Institute of Architects in Los Angeles, presenting his forthcoming book, Green Obsession, Trees Towards Cities, Humans Towards Forests. Green Obsession will be published in January 2022 and retraces the long path that he and his studio have followed in the last 15 years of activities, aiming at redefining the relationship between city and nature. Boeri is full professor at Politecnico di Milano and visiting professor in several international universities, including Harvard University Graduate School of Design, the Strelka Institute in Moscow, and the Polytechnique in Lausanne. In Shanghai, he is also director of the Future City Lab at Tongji University, a postdoctoral research program. Author and director of the magazine Domus and Abitare, Stefano Boeri has played the role of curator in many international architecture and urban planning exhibitions. He also designed the first national museum devoted to Mediterranean civilizations, the Museum, a French government project which opened in 2013. His work has a constant focus on the geopolitical and environmental implications of urban phenomena. In particular, the attention to the relationship between city and living nature leads in 2014 to the realization of the Bosco Verticale in Milan, the first prototype of residential building, hosting 800 trees and over 20,000 plants. Among the many players in the debate on climate change in the field of international architecture, in 2018, Stefano Boeri was co-chair of the Scientific Committee for the first World Forum on Urban Forests, organized with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. In 2019, he presented in New York the Great Green Wall of Cities project on occasion of the UN Climate Action Summit 2019. In 2018, he was also appointed president of the Triennale in Milan. Carlo Caccavale brings 15 years of experience at the American Institute of Architects in Los Angeles to his position as its executive director. He has initiated a number of AIA LA's conferences, including Encompass, the Conference to Actualize Diversity and Inclusion, Design for Dignity, focused on homelessness and housing affordability, and Powerful Women Leading Design. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank architect Stefano Boeri and executive director Carlo Caccavale for their participation today, and Gaia Ceccaroli, International PR Communications, for our collaboration in this event. And now, without any further ado, please welcome Carlo Caccavale.
Thank you very much, Valeria. It's a pleasure to be here today, and to me, it's a pleasure to meet Stefano Boeri. He is an architect that I've held in the highest esteem for quite some time now. Last time I was in Milan, I was amazed at the renaissance of one area called Porta Nuova, whose crown jewels are two incredible towers, the vertical forest, which I think you all know. Before I ask Stefano a few questions to frame the conversation, and before we go into his fantastic book, I wanted to let you all know that we are having a Q&A moment at the end of this conversation. So please make sure to write your questions in the chat and I will read them. Also, I would like to point out some of the highlights of Stefano's extremely productive career. Graduated in architecture at the Milano Politecnico, received a PhD from the Istituto Universitario di Architettura of Venice, professor of urban planning at Milano Politecnico, as mentioned, guest professors at many prestigious universities of architecture from Harvard to Moscow, writer, researcher, magazine editor, curator, designer of the master plan for the Milano World Expo in 2015, and so much more. I think, Stefano, your resume is as thick as the yellow pages, and reading it would take the whole hour and more. So congratulations on your many achievements and your leadership in the design and architectural world. So let's get the conversation rolling. And my first question for you, Stefano, would be about your mother. Your mother was a very influential figure in the Italian architectural landscape. She was one of the first female architects in Italy. To what extent do you think your mother influenced you to become an architect?
Well, it's a very, first of all, thanks, Carlo, and thanks, Valeria, for inviting me. It's a really pleasure to be with you today. And you know, it's not so easy to, let's say, to decipher the very delicate and at the same time intense relation that you have with the father or with the mother who, with your same profession. I've never worked with my mother, but Chini was always present in my life as a model. Well, just to remember something, I remember that when I was 17, my mother invited me to follow her journey to LA, and she was working at LA. And I remember we had just decided to spend one day in San Diego, and during the these hours, she decided to go to see Louis Kahn masterpiece, the Salk Institute in Loyola. Well, I remember so well that just walking in this amazing space where you, let's say, you feel the ocean without seeing the ocean, and you are, let's say, probably, let's say, experiencing the presence of the concept of a school, all its power. I decided to start to study architecture. So that was a way in which my mother was so influential.
That's fantastic. And what a wonderful inspirational project. Your career is very varied. It's very unique, I think, and it's definitely outstanding. Could you please trace for us the path that brought you from, you know, your graduations to today's passion for green cities?
I think it's so important for an architect to be aware of his obsession, and at the same time, it's very important to decide at a certain moment of your life to, let's say, to cultivate your obsessions. And sometimes these obsessions are implicit, not immediately visible. Sometimes they come up, they become immediately, suddenly extremely, let's say, present, and sometimes also urgent. I believe, well, I have always been obsessional by trees and by the life of trees. Trees are individuals. Trees are, capable to have their own intelligence, or sensitivity, the capacity to communicate using roots. So I was always been extremely attracted by the life and the evolution trajectory of trees. And probably I started in a more or less explicit way to cultivate the obsession, or to make trees present also in our architectural proposals. And so the idea to combine living nature and architecture, trying to let's say, to this combination and making trees not a present in terms of decoration or ornamental presence, but as a basic component of architecture itself, was at the beginning was probably an implicit dream, that it becomes awareness, and then after some years it becomes a reality.
I love the idea of seeing forest trees as thinking elements of our in our life, which is really very stimulating. However, I also think that architecture, to me, architecture is an art, but I also think architecture is a business. So how can architects sell green buildings to their clients? What is basically the economic return on investment? What are your arguments when you present your buildings, your projects to clients?
Well, I think it's not so complicated now to convince a real estate developer or a client of the, let's say, necessity to make our city greener, and to do that, to make our building greener. There are many advantages in what we can do. First, it's an advantage in terms of, let's say, reducing the cost that normally you are investing in order to let's say, reduce the heat of the city. Trees and plants are reducing the consumption of energy for condition of the air in summer period. Then I think there is a very strong advantage in the proximity of trees, also from a psychological point of view. And I think that I believe that also this dramatic period that you experienced in the last months has, let's say, as a kind of legacy, fragility, which is also connected with the fact that we have understood we have to redefine our relation with living nature. And from that point of view, I think that this proximity with trees, with plants who lives in our intimate space, it's absolutely exceptional and something that help us a lot. But then trees are cleaning the air, are absorbing the dust, microparticulate dust that produce urban pollution. Trees are absorbing the CO2, which is, as we know, that's more an abstract perception, but it's so important. It's a region of global warming, and so the more we can have trees and plants in our cities, the more we are, let's say, absorbing the CO2 where the CO2 is mostly produced, which are cities. So I think there are a certain number of reasons that we are normally used when we have to convince a client. But what's happened now is more and more clients are asking us to do green buildings from the beginning.
Fantastic. As Valeria mentioned, your latest book is called Green Obsession: Trees Towards Cities and Humans Towards Forest. So I would invite you to tell us more about your book, and maybe tell us more, tell us all how we can all become a little more green obsessed.
Thank you so much. So
thank you.
I think the best way to talk about my green obsession is simply to show you a series of images that I think are, let's say, probably to explain what we do, what we have done from the beginning. So first of all, my work is not an individual work. We are really, let's say, a lab. We have so many different places where we are based, but basically we have two offices. One is in Milano and the other in Shanghai. And in these two spaces, we produce images, we produce for sure also master planning. Yes, we produce concept, we produce books, we produce, let's say, also some, let's say, communication strategies. And this is the cover of the book that we are going to publish with international Spanish publishers called Actar, based in Barcelona. And that's another book that we have recently published in Italy that will over also in English in the next months. Well, vertical forest, as I told you, probably was an obsession I had from the end. I started many years ago to see how it was possible to realize a high-rise building that could become as an ecosystem. We know well which are the advantages of trees in terms of capacity to produce oxygen, to absorb CO2, to absorb the dust of pollution, to protect and heating the surfaces of the buildings. And then we know that there are so many other advantages connected with our health, which are so important. So for that reason, I was extremely happy when in 2006, talking with a very important client, which is probably you know him because it's part of the history of the real estate in the United States, which is Jeremy Hines, who came in Milano and wanted, together with his Italian CEO Manfredi Catella, to develop a new settlement in the center of Milano. And they asked me to imagine how to change this part of this larger area, adding 3 or 4 new buildings. And I proposed them to, instead of, let's say, a system of low-rise building, to have 2 towers, 2 high-rise buildings, but with this, let's say, polarity to be, let's say, 2 towers covered with a facade with plants and trees. And so the first reaction was, I think I believe you are crazy, but if you will be able in 1 month to come back answering to this list of questions, that are very technical questions, I will promise you that we will go ahead. So we had 1 month, we gathered a bunch of experts, ethologists, botanists, structural engineers. We are working with art, we are working with other people, and finally we came back with the answers. Just to give you an example of the answer, that one of the questions was, how can a tree, let's say, live at 100 meter, 150 meter, also with extreme windy conditions, for instance. So we are Miami to check. It was possible to imagine a new way to fix the roots of the trees in a pot with a very specific condition. Also in the area of wind. And then other questions were related with the system of irrigation, with the cost of maintenance, and so on. And finally, we came back and they accepted our challenge. They became part of the challenge, and we started to design and then build. And the building was finished in 2014 because we had the period of 2009, 2010, was let's say, a very serious crisis of the real estate sector, also in Italy and in Europe, but finally we got it. And honestly, I think that this building is an experiment, is a prototype, and at the same time is one of the possible ways we have to deal with global warming, and is one of the possible ways to develop this concept of urban forestry, urban forestation, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important, say, challenge for the future. We are working a lot now after the experiment in Milano, and we are producing many, let's say, reinterpretation or declination of the vertical forest model. I'm talking about declination and variation on the theme instead of replica, because what we make is really to design house for trees and humans, and we do that every time, starting from a very serious observation of the climate condition. Then we together with our experts in botany, we started to do a list of all the natural species of trees and plants that can better date to this specific climate condition. And only at that moment, we start to design the facade of the building, imagining that and designing that any facade should, let's say, allow every species of trees to grow up, let's say, respecting a specific evolution, a specific needs for space. So the void between the balcony, between the loggia, between roofs and the balcony, it's the space where every species can develop its habitat. So that's the reason we really treat trees as users, as clients, if you want, of what we do. We are normally used to collaborate with other colleagues and with also landscape and design or botanists, like in the case of the competition we had just won in Milano with Dillers, Scopiti and Renfro, who will be a part of building a construction on a new typology of vertical forest, or what we have just opened in Belgium or many other places. And now I go a little bit faster, trying to show some of the things that we are doing. This is a building that we started last week to build in Utrecht, in Holland. What makes this building interesting is it's a multifunctional vertical forest. It's a basement, which is commercial, then offices, then residential. And this is a project that we have just presented in Milano. And what makes this building, I think, interesting is the fact that it's not a high-rise building. It's more a courtyard, or if you want, the vertical forest developed around a courtyard and a very ancient tree who was there at the beginning. And it's interesting. It's a residential building, but extremely powerful in its capacity to decline as a vertical forest experience in a totally different system. And here, what we think is most important is the use of the roof as common green terraces. All the roofs are, from my point of view, we know so well how the needs for outdoor space is important nowadays. And this is a building that we just finished to build in Belgium, in Antwerp, where we started to do exactly this idea of use of the roofs as space for habitation and life. You see some images on the renderings, and this is the building, how it is now. So what makes this building so interesting that the roofs are, let's say, affordable for everybody and used by all the tenants of the buildings itself. And also this idea that the lodges have a kind of possible extension of the interior space. So it's a kind of variable geometry of any apartments of this Antwerp building with the roofs. Again, we are working, and this is probably the most strong and let's say successful challenge. So from the beginning, we really wanted to demonstrate that it's possible to realize a green building with such important amount of plants for everybody. And this is the Trudeau vertical forest in Eindhoven. And this is a social housing complex, social housing architecture. Cost less than 1,300 euros per square meter. And it has basically 130 lofts / apartments, 50 square meter each one, with cost of rent of about 600 euro a month. So it's really affordable for everybody. That's the picture we just got last week when we were there for the opening. And we are very happy because this is really the of our work, and was to demonstrate that after Milano was possible to, let's say, redefine the typology of vertical forest in a totally affordable way. I believe that these are some possible, let's say, also direction that our experience that should follow. One is about makes the building affordable for everybody. A second one is try to use materials that make this building sustainable, not only when they finish, but also in the construction process. That's the reason we are working more and more using wood and timber for the structure, for the slab of the building. And the third one is what you are seeing now, is the fact that we have to, when we can, that's really the opportunity to build new green architectures, but we know so well that the most crucial challenge is how we can make green, make sustainable buildings that have already been built. And this is, for instance, what we are doing in Brussels, where there is this huge office building complex that we are going to transform in a residential building, and in a green building, adding to the existing facade a new green facade, and that is do so. It's just to tell you that this variegation on the theme of vertical forest is following some principal direction, but makes our work extremely intriguing, because every time we start again, we start from the beginning. So it's really, honestly, really exciting. And this is just to go back to what I was saying before, the Botanica the Gaia Tower in Milan on the left, and on the right you have the project that we have developed together with Dillo Scofidi and Rempro. This is also extremely interesting for many reasons. One is that we are selecting the plants, shrubs, trees in order to, let's say, stress and if you want to straighten the capacity of this building to become mutant, following the change of the light, of the sunlight, but also following the sequence of seasons. And I think this is so unusual to see a building that continuously change in terms of colors. And this you see the sequence of different chromatic and then or changing also in the dimension and the relation between living nature and building. Just to a little bit go ahead talking, introducing a new issue correlated with the green obsession. So green obsession is also a question of scale, and it is true. What Valeria was saying, that in New York 2 years ago at the Forum on Climate Change, we were part of discussion with other researchers and let's say thinkers and observers like Richard Weller, that are working on this idea of how to make the planet in condition to, let's say, to do with how to tackle down or reverse climate change and global warming. And one of the ways is to work on the concept of biodiversity, how we can do to, let's say, straighten and, let's say, diffuse biodiversity. And Richard Weller's concept, as you know, the concept of world park is to see how it's possible to connect natural parks, natural oases, and basically the part of the world where you have that's your max biodiversity. And the model that we were studying is something which exists already. Also, it is not so new, which is this amazing green wall that the countries of African Union started to realize since 2009 in sub-Saharan Africa. It's amazing how this sequence of forest, woodlands, agricultural field was used now to stop the certification of the extension of the Sahara Desert toward south. And in that occasion, in New York, we're discussing how to possibly with FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, to extend this idea to other parts of the world. And this is what we now trying to do in Southern Europe and basically in Italy, trying to combine through biological corridor of biodiversity, forest, oases, and natural parks in Italy. At the same time, we know well that we have two also other ways to involve cities in this new concept of a world park. We need cities for many reasons, because from one side we need cities not as obstacles of this biological corridor, but as also, let's say, hubs or generators of biodiversity all around. And at the same time, we know that city needs to be greener. So this is some example of what we are trying to do, for instance, in China, where we are involved in many projects to make cities greener. And that's some example of what we have done as a part of the world. This is the project we have developed 10 years ago in Albania, in Tirana, the capital of Tirana, where we are really proposing this orbital forest, which is now built. So we have planted more than 400,000 buildings. And this is a project we had just instituted proposed for Genève. The request was to imagine how to extend the Genève architecture. And our proposal was not to extend the city, but to imagine a kind of green ring which connecting Genève, which is in Switzerland, with Annecy, which is in France. So a kind of transnational metropolitan archipelago who follows the ring of the future collider particles, so the future CERN. And the idea of this, let's say, green ring, which is at the same time a constellation of small villages and the two main cities of Genève and Annecy, is that at the center of this new metropolitan environment, you don't have a square, you don't have a monument, you don't have a church, but you have a mountain, the Salève, which is an amazing demonstration of biodiversity. So I think this Genève example is quite useful to let's say, to describe what we want to do and what we're going to do in terms of make our idea of green city and green building larger at different scales. These are some exercises we have done in Saudi Arabia for new cities that have to grow from the beginning as green. And that's probably what you see here is the most advanced and the most pretty pragmatic experience that we are now exploring, which is in Cancun, Southeast Mexico, where we have been asked to imagine a new settlement in a let's say in a part of the Cancun territory where a Chinese company started some years ago to build a huge mall that was stopped, and then that, let's say, surface of many hectares, this concrete surface, was like a kind of empty basement where we have been asked to imagine something completely different, like to the client say, well, we are really interested to do that, but only if we start to imagine something completely new. And this new is the idea to have a forest city with basically 100,000 people and 7 million of plants. We're in the main composite of this idea in Cancun was to host here 6 departments of important Mexican university with aim to, let's say, avoid the young student, Mexican student to go abroad, maybe to go in Silicon Valley or other parts of the world, and to try to see if it was possible to attract international company here, international quarter here to work with the best of the research in Mexico. And this is some images of what we are now planning to realize. It's a master plan, which is also in condition to, let's say, consider the possible variation that will happen time by time in the future, and some images of this buffer that will, how you see, perimetering the entire settlement that will be done by system of solar panels to make this new forest city self-sufficiency from the point of view of energy and agricultural field, in order to try also to contribute in terms of transformation of agricultural products into food related to the life of the inhabitants. Then just to try to back to Milano. Milano, it's a city where we started to develop this challenge with the vertical forest, but we also are working at different scale. And this is for instance, the proposal of Green River that put together all the abandoned areas in the city. And here the idea was to, let's say, really trying to bring back living nature, not in terms of, let's say, artificial nature or cultivated nature or gardens, but more in the sense of really to bring back nature in terms of fields, lakes, mountains, and forests. And try to let's say, to limitate the volumetric presence of the new building on the edges of these huge natural environments. At the same time, in Milano, we have launched this campaign to plant 3 million of trees. And that's something which we know is part of the public policies of the agenda of many, many metropolises and cities in the world, like New York have done with a 1 million plant project, like Shanghai, like Melbourne, like Berlin. And that's part of what we are now going to imagine to do with potential forestation. Well, so that's what we have done. So sorry, I just try to select some of the, let's say, example of our involvement in our, let's say, proposal for nation of this idea of make cities greener. For sure, it's one of the pillars of the campaign to deal with global warming and climate change. So circular economy on side and also for sure or what we can do in order to use more renewable energies and to use of hydrogen as a way to straighten the possibility to use energy consumption. Well, it's other pillars of this approach, of this effort that we have everywhere in the world to tackle down climate change and global warming. But forest and forestation and green, clearly to put it, are probably the most economical, the most inclusive, the most pragmatic way to try to improve the quality of life and to try to deal with climate change. Last but not least, I think it's since I'm here just a few weeks after a very important venue, a very important event that makes Milano, let's say, probably visible all over the world, which is the Design Week, the Salone del Mobile. Last week, I simply want to show you what we have done here in Milano a few weeks ago, at the beginning of September, was, let's say, a very particular edition of the Salone del Mobile, smaller, but in a certain way, powerful, where we have tried to let's say, to invite experts and buyers, and also the public, families from Italy and the countries of the world, let's say, suggesting that it's possible to imagine a fair, not only for buyers, but also for everybody. So not only B2B, but also B2C. And we were using for the first time in the Salone del Mobile, in the Design Week, let's say also all the digital, but also with the QR code, you could buy everything. So experiencing the real presence of furniture, but at the same time, using the agility of the digital here to buy.
Imagine
and,
a chair.
This is just
is it a chair that spins, that leans, that turns? It is a chair full of lungs. Is it a chair with 4 legs, 3 legs, or maybe even none? A chair designed for your posture, or for your comfort, or simply just to match the wallpaper. Maybe it's so iconic you just cannot escape it. Maybe it was designed by a crazy man in the 80s. Because after all, a chair is a chair. Let's just not forget one tiny little detail though. You can still sit on it, right? Because that is super, super new, super unique, super Salone. The 5th of September at Roffiera Milan.
And the Super Salone was important for many reasons, but also for some reasons that are extremely coherent to what I think before. So one was that all the setups were cycled or used. All the material that used in the fair were, let's say, imagined from the beginning in order to make it used. And the setups dismantled and remodeled in different ways. And that's one of the first reason with this new format of the Salone del Mobile. Another very important concept was inviting the companies, furniture, to try to, let's say, work on this idea of variable flexibility of the furniture, and that's, I think, is such an interesting, intriguing way to try to respond to the demand that are coming from the market of bedroom that becomes a place where we are now in condition to work, so remote working, or to kitchen that becomes space where you can imagine to have a common places. So it was very important also for us, for me, to see how companies, furniture companies from all over the world are so involved in trying to, let's say, show solution to the demands that comes from millions of families all over the world. So thank you so much. I think I was very, but I think that sometimes images are talking better than words when you have to describe an obsession like the one I had.
Stefano, thank you so very much. I think the future that you have in your mind and the vision you're creating for us is absolutely amazing. And, you know, I can't wait basically for more and more cities to embrace your philosophy and for your philosophy to be distributed around the world, because I think it will be a better world for us all to live in. We have a few questions and I would like to ask them to you, if okay. We have a question from Paula Gragmeyer. Paul, I'm sorry if I'm botching your name right now. Can you tell us something about the structure needed to support the growing trees and the soaked soil on the cantilever terraces of the Bosco Verticale?
Yeah, allora, it's very simple because the Bosco Verticale was, as I told you, the first example of a high-rise green building, and we have worked a lot with Arup, engineer company, to try to anticipate some problems. In that very case, we have used, let's say, a structure which is basically on concrete and steel, and the slabs are a system of pre-tensed slabs that are capable to host on the perimeter, on the edge, such a quite heavy presence of the pots and the soil. But what was so important let's say in the process of construction and also in the design of the vertical forest was the composition of the soil, because the soil has to be not too much heavy in order to, let's say facilitate actually the work of the structure and the slabs. At the same time, not too light, because we have to keep the roots of the trees stable, also in a extreme windy condition. So it was a very delicate balance between different needs. And that was the beginning. Now we are working with timber, we're going with wooden slabs, and things are changing a lot. But we have introduced prefabrication now, so the pots that we are producing in Eindhoven, that one of the reasons which helped us to reduce the cost of construction, and also at the end reduce the cost of the building, was that using prefabrication, we can really, let's say, make this different part much more efficient.
Thank you. I have another question from Elizabeth Castagna. Elizabeth asks, how have the green architecture balanced the carbon emission produced by the city? So in short, how many green architecture buildings will be enough to balance the carbon emission output per square mile city?
No, I think not. They will not be enough. So we have to make and let's try to let's say promote simultaneously different ways to make our city greener. So I was just showing you what we are doing when we are proposing a very strong forestation of our city. So it's not simply to create woodland and forest all around the city, but also to, let's say, to substitute the payment of the park area of the city with plants and trees, work on the producing, let's say, also places where cordial green, making our roofs green. So we have so many ways to make our city greener, and vertical forests are only one of them. So I think the challenge is much bigger than simply adding some buildings. But these green buildings are extremely strong as a complex and super dense ecosystem in, let's say, producing advantages all around in terms of cleaning the air, reducing the heat. So I think we have really to use all these tools, not only one.
Yeah, I agree with you. Water clearly is a very important element in the conception of, forests, basically. And so with regards to water, I have a question from Michael Bulander, who's also an architect and a friend. Do you have ideas for water harvesting, fog or dew, to address greenery in dry climates? How can we collect water?
Yeah. No, there are many ways. What we have done, and we have used that, let's say, a system of irrigation who was developed in Israel, and it's a very, very smart an efficient system that reduces at maximum the use of water in terms of irrigating the system of pots that we have all around our tower buildings. But at the same time, it's very important also to recycle the water, to recycle the gray water, to use the rainwater. And when it's possible, like happens in Milano or in Eindhoven and other parts of the world, to also to work using the water which is underground. So not only the thermal plants, but also extracting from the ground the water and then using it, and then make back when it's used on the ground. So that's one of the way that we normally have. For sure, when you have to work in as we are doing in Cairo or in Saudi, or the point is completely different. So it's very delicate and it's very important to avoid consumption of water, but it's possible to do that. And I think we are now in condition to minimize the quantity of water what we need to irrigate the plants.
And talking of which, I have a couple of more technical questions about your buildings. A question from Yonsu Kim: how planters are watered and water is drained?
Sorry, our planters are?
How the planters are watered and how do you drain the water from the planters? I guess it's a question about irrigation. So they're asking, what is the process of watering the plants and how is the water drained from the planters?
Well, this is a very technical question, but I told you it's really about a system of sensor that you have in every pot that at the same time is a system of small drops that are entering in the pots, in the soil. And the sensor is at the same time an amazing, maybe I can explain something more, but it's an amazing way to control, to monitorize the humidity of the pots. But what I should probably to tell you, and I can tell you now, is that our decision to make all what is green, let's say, centralized in a way. So basically the maintenance is centralized, always centralized. We have we have decided to, let's say, to make all the plants that are covering the facade of our building part of a common centralized station system. And at the beginning, I had a lot of doubt on that because I love the idea that every tenant, every owner apartment could, let's say, have his own selection of plants, trees, shrubs, and bushes, and so on. But finally, this different option to have a centralized station where we monitorize the condition of every pot or the plants or the shrubs had some amazing advantages. First, we reduce the cost of maintenance. Second, we transmit the idea that plants and greens are a common good for everybody. So the sense of respect where plant was much stronger in this case. And finally, also to make more efficient the system of irrigation and to reduce the consumption of water.
And again, another little technical question. How do you handle the expansion of the roots from Paola Stropiana?
The expansion of the roots but that's something that, so another thing that I explained, so every time that we design and build a vertical forest, we prepare the trees, the plants, the shrub that we have selected, we have already selected in relation with the climate condition in a botanic nursery. And that's so important because we follow the up of the trees, let's say, teaching the roots to grow in a certain way that will help us when we are moving from the botanic nursery to the construction site trees. The roots of the trees could, let's say, be in condition to, let's say, extend their branch in a very, let's say, complex way, not being only around the trunk, but making the trees stable. So there are some, let's say, technical what we have studied and learned, although with thanks to the experience of the vertical forest. And it's a very delicate and important passage, how we prepare the plants and the roots to be able to live and to be stable in the pots of the balconies.
Got it. And Marcella Rabel has a question about how often will the trees need to be replaced in your experience so far?
Amazing. This is something of totally unexpected, but basically the internal percentage it's ridiculous. But in Milano, we have 20,000 plants, 21,000 plants, and basically 850 trees. We have now the trees started to be moved from the botanic nursery to the construction site in 2012. So basically it's 10 years, let's say 9 years. We have changed 12 trees.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
really
great.
Not honestly, it's amazing how they stay well, and they not simply
That's
survive,
fantastic.
but they are, let's say, growing well.
They're really happy.
Yeah, they are happy.
They're very happy.
The birds that are nesting there are happy. The humans that are living on the balcony are happy. No, it's a quite let's say happy condition, happy ecosystem of joy.
And talking about the trees and the plants in your buildings, what are the criteria, in the plant selection? How do you select plants for the building?
First is about, I told you about the climate condition, and that's so it's for sure that's the reason our architecture in northern China are different from the architecture we could have in Mexico. The second, it's really connected with the different sunlight exposure. So, for instance, on the northern facade of the building, we are normally used because it's changed so much where you are, but normally used to have trees that are losing the leaves in winter time, just to make the sunlight entering better in winter time. And for sure, now the facade are more penalized from that point of view. So, and then there is honestly, there is also, if I, a little bit, let's say, shame to tell that, but this is also an aesthetical contribution that I love to imagine also chromatic combination of the plants in order to, for instance, what you have, I show you, but the Botanica Tower in Milano, that will be extremely spectacular, the way that every season you will see a different part of the building changing colors. No? So that's architecture. So I'm very honest. Sometimes I have colleagues that are criticizing our approach, saying, well, but you are hiddening the building, you are hiddening architecture. I answer saying that no, I simply use living nature as a component of my idea of architecture. So why not? Why should not use the leaves or the branch like you use the stones, or I don't know, different variation of materials. So that's it.
Absolutely. Well, Stefano, we're heading to 9 o'clock in Italy. I know it's either dinner time and you have another engagement. So I just want to thank you so very much for this presentation and the conversation. It was a pleasure. It's incredible what you're doing.
For your question, and for you for me to, let's say, try to sum up in 30 minutes, let's say, what we're developing in many years, but it was amazing. And thank you so much also, Valeria, for your kind hospitality.
Well, I have to thank you, Stefano, because this is really a pleasure and an honor too. And thank you, Carlo, too, for this truly inspiring and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you, Gaia, too, and thank you all for joining us today. I would like to remind our audience that the Institute of Los Angeles not only promotes Italian culture and design and architecture, and by the way, mentioning the great influence of his mother on Stefano's work, as he was mentioning, here in Westwood, just at our entrance, everyone can see on display RLA ears, her work. It can be admired today as we have it here, Serpentone 78. So this is also an invite to Stefano to relive again, once again, his Los Angeles and San Diego years that he remembers so vividly, and visit us soon in person, now that the travel ban can allow that. The Institute in Los Angeles also promotes Italian language and culture in Southern California and in the Southwest of the United States through language programs and cultural events as part of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. We're happy to share with you in October a very rich program of online events continuing the year-long celebration of Dante as part of the Italian Language Week in the world, and the online presentations by the acclaimed and award-winning authors Gianrico Carofiglio, organized by the Institute with the Los Angeles Public Library, and Giulia Caminito with the Campiello Prize. We hope to see you all again soon in person at the Institute for the current exhibit, A Journey Through Italian Design, on view by appointment and online too. I personally invite you all to follow us on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for daily posts on Italian culture and the details of our upcoming events. And please visit our YouTube channel for past events. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Grazie e arrivederci.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Bye-bye.
Grazie. Grazie a tutti.